Hi, good afternoon, LinkedIn. Thanks again for joining us. Welcome to part two of we're talking about evergreen campaigns with some of our Yibu Digital team. Um, if you don't know us and you haven't been before, you missed part one, you can catch it on our YouTube channel or send me a quick message. Happy to share it with you. But here at Yibu Digital, we empower nonprofits to lead with digital. So everything from front end marketing, Google Ads, all the way through to year end campaigns and ongoing customer support. And one of the things we've really been advocating to a lot of our clients is the idea of starting to do evergreen campaigns. And so we kind of introduced that subject previously with everybody 2 weeks ago. So if you're joining us again, thanks for coming back. And if this subject is new to you, we'll try and do a bit of a recap as we're going along here. But part two is all about email. And I know for myself, at least, still reading lots of documentation about how important email is for nonprofits. And so I'm bringing two of my wonderful coworkers to the table with us today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and a bit of their background in nonprofit work. So, Trevor?
Take it away.
Yeah, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trevor Rickman. I'm the lead digital strategist here at Yibu Digital. So working with our clients to execute email and paid media marketing campaigns, develop fundraising strategy. That's a pretty broad reaching term that essentially means things like increasing lifetime value, decreasing attrition, migrating, cultivating donors to different areas of their file. All of the wonderful things that I'm sure you all do on a daily basis.
Wonderful. And CJ?
Yeah, hi, everyone. So I've been with Yibu for, I think, going on 3 years now, or very soon. So I've been working closely with Trevor and the digital marketing team with our clients. And my area of specialty would be, of course, email. We have a colleague who specializes in more on the social side of things, along with Trevor. So yeah, I've been doing this web and IT thing for almost 20 years, actually. Everything from website development and user studies and content management and email, of course. And I certainly have a affinity for email, just because I think the challenge that it brings in terms of both communicating, but also just the tech side as well, in terms of email building and getting them to display properly and all the different devices and platforms out there nowadays, and then all the privacy and things like that. So I think it's a great area to focus on. And email is still alive and well and will be for quite some time, even though we've got text messaging, social media, SMS, and so on. Email still certainly outperforms some of those in some cases as well. So yeah, looking forward to talking more about it.
Awesome. That's great. And CJ is one of the amazing co-authors on a whole bunch of our Yibu email-based resources. So I'm really excited. Thanks, guys, for doing this with me. I know this is going to be a great conversation. And for anyone listening in, we're happy to take questions in real time. Both the guys have been open to that idea. So if we're talking about something, you have more questions, please feel free to just jump into the comments and I can bring them in and we'll try to handle them as they come. So let's start this off and with the big overarching question, and I'll let Trevor start us off, but what do we mean when we say email cultivation? Because this is a big part of this evergreen campaign idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that CJ and I have been talking a lot about lately. Like, I think historically organizations have viewed their email cultivation to primarily involve things like onboarding, right? Like we're cultivating our donors through an onboarding series, which, from our perspective, while true, is often kind of just the start of what we would consider like true donor cultivation via email. And what I mean by that is often like a lot of clients, when we come in contact with them, either have just implemented an onboarding series, or the onboarding series that they've had for many, many years really only involves, like, let's say 3 to 5 emails over the course of 2 months. And while that's certainly a great start, I think, when we're talking about email, really what we're talking about is trying to build a relationship with constituents, right? Like in most cases, these are people who are relatively new to the organization, who need to be, excuse me, there's a dog in the background, who need to be introduced to your organization over a longer period of time. And so from our perspective, email cultivation really is, you know, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but is certainly something that's ongoing, and from an onboarding perspective, something that can often take, you know, 12 months. It's something that I think, you know, is really the core of it is how do we build a relationship, right? And
Yeah.
I think, you know, one of the things that we often ask clients to do when they're taking stock of what their email cultivation or email program looks like is how much of it involves that relationship building exercise. And I think what we see more often than not is a little bit of relationship building at the beginning and then a whole lot of asking. And,
Absolutely.
you know, CJ, I know you have some thoughts and opinions on email cultivation as well. Um, yeah, anything to add there, or have I
Yeah,
taken
you
it?
covered. Yeah, you covered most of it. But yeah, I think cultivation for me it equals nurturing. You're nurturing. You said building relationships, so you're also nurturing your constituents, your new donors, your new subscribers, what have you, and trying to develop that relationship in a controlled fashion as well. And so, as Trevor alluded to about doing it over a number of months, like even as high as up to 12 months. Some clients go, what? What?
Yeah.
But that nurturing process or that cultivation is in that way it's controlled so that you have the opportunity to gather the analytics and statistics on what's working and how retention is going with those particular emails that you have set up in a series of that cultivating. So that's why sometimes we recommend to go much higher than your standard first, 4 to 6 weeks in some cases, because you've got that control where you can measure and then you can adjust and have triggers as well inside your cultivation series. So there's a number of factors that are involved with setting up that sort of email cultivation that gives you just much more control, much more insight for then being able to graduate those particular constituents, whether they're a new subscriber. I mean, obviously, the end goal is you get a new subscriber is to get them to become a donor. You have a new single gift donor. The plan is to get them to become a monthly donor. You have maybe monthly donors, but then at some point during a cultivation point, you may want to talk about legacy giving or something like that as well. So there's all sorts of types of cultivation you can do with the different types of segments and audiences that you have.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, right? Is understanding what the objective of each portion of your file is, and it's something that you know, most of the time when we get that, we ask that question. It's, well, we just want to leverage more money out of these constituents, and that's a totally fair answer, but it's also not the objective; it's the result, right? Like and so what we try and figure out is, well, certainly for new email subscribers, we want to get them to become one-time gift donors. What are the more micro wins over the course of that subscriber's lifetime that you can sort of measure, that you can measure as success, right? Because it's really difficult, especially with new subscribers or even one-time gift donors. Monthly is a little bit easier because we've got an obvious KPI, which is attrition, right? Like, are they canceling their monthly gifts? If they're not, we know we're probably doing a pretty good job. But for the other two, they're more ethereal kind of KPIs. And so starting to drill down some of those KPIs and really starting to understand what it is you're looking for as far as engagement and cultivation is a really good way to understand the performance of your quote unquote email cultivation or what you put in place. Um, and it's something that we try and do, you know, over the course of these longer onboarding series. Now, what I should say is, like, we're recommending longer onboarding series, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're not asking. You know, CJ mentioned we're just trying to more effectively control the narrative over a longer period of time. And so that doesn't mean we're not, you know, still asking once, twice, three times over the course of that onboarding series. We're just taking more control over what it is those donors are seeing. And, you know, certainly they're still being introduced to cornerstone campaigns like end of year, like Giving Tuesday, things that, you know, clients are obviously raising a lot of money from. But for the most part, we're just trying to do a better job of creating a baseline of data for ourselves. It's really difficult, for instance, to understand how your email is performing if they're coming on board, they're onboarding for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they're just being dumped into the regular communication calendar. Because for some, that transition may take place right at end of year, where they're about to receive 8 emails, all that are donations. For those that come on in January, those donors may not get anything except a monthly newsletter.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to understand and benchmark your email performance when you're offering such drastically different experiences to people who are coming into different parts of your file. So this extended onboarding period really allows us to control their relationship and how they're perceiving us over a certain amount of time a lot more effectively than maybe your current sort of 4 to 6 weeks onboarding has in now or in the past.
Well, and I've definitely seen too, in longer email campaigns when you're doing this kind of like education onboarding, like, and I'm sure at some point it becomes less onboarding and slightly more education value,
Yeah.
right? As you
Yep.
further the journey. But you can really find out that some donors are very interested in talking about X program, but
For
not so much in this stuff over here. But if you don't continue over time to
Yep.
have this exposure to a longer series, it's really hard to kind of see, if they just came in through the general, like a general donation at year
Yep.
end, what are they actually interested in? What do they care about?
Yep.
And like you said, it's that natural relationship building and so vital to your fundraising department or fundraisers, or maybe you're the same person doing both things. I see Amina Muhammad saying hi. Hi, Amina. And I know people like herself have all the jobs. They do all the things, right? And so being able to go, this person is engaging on this level at month 6, maybe they deserve some more personalized communication, like one-to-one communication, but you can't get that probably in 6 weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, what you'll find, I'm a data geek, and CJ, without speaking for you, I think you are as well. Like what we find in standardizing the communication strategy for newly onboarded donors is that you get data. The data you get is obviously more universal. It's more standardized data, right? Like email 1 is always going to be email 1, email 10 is always going to be email 10.
Yeah.
And assuming they're excluded from other things, you kind of know what they're getting and what their exposure to your organization has been. And the longer you do it, you start to find really interesting inflection points. Like 6 months into a relationship, all of a sudden their engagement drops off, and you know where you can start to put your effort in. I think the challenge we have is as marketers when we're operating on an annualized calendar where everybody's getting everything, depending on what time of the year it is that we're not able to use data as effectively, right? Like if we know that 6 months into a relationship, somebody's kind of engagement starts to end off, and you're operating on an annualized calendar, and that 6 months comes up around end of year, there's not a lot we can do, right? Like we have to send those fundraising emails. Or if it's if you standardize that relationship and that deployment timing, you can actually step in more effectively, sort of in those important times, and offer, some sort of engagement mechanism that provides a little bit more value. A great example of that is I used to work for an organization who kind of saw this sort of drop off in the engagement of a file after about 6 months, and we introduced what we called. Excuse me, Siri's yelling at me for needing to stand up or step more or do something today that I haven't yet done. And we introduced something called the Poop IQ email. Right? It was a really simple quiz, like how much do you know about poop? Which I promise is the last time I will say that in LinkedIn Live. And it was the highest opened email with the highest number of engagements, and it curbed some of that 6-month disengagement we were seeing amongst the file. But we never would have known that was the place to put it had we not had all of these months of data, which showed us, like, over a file of 200,000 people, this is where people, as a data point, stop engaging with our content.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Poop based. Who knew, right? Who knew?
Poop-based content.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Well, this kind of moves very naturally into the next part of our conversation, which is really focusing in on, how can email complement all of the paid media efforts and just create this kind of like donor journey that feels just more holistic,
Yeah.
right? Like it feels natural. So,
Yeah.
how do you see email fitting into that entire donor engagement strategy?
Yeah, I mean, like the evergreen paid media, I think what we often fail to remember is that evergreen paid media in general is a vehicle to get donors to take an action, right? An email sign up, a donation, whatever it happens to be. It's not a mechanism by which we teach donors what we do. And so I think when you ignore email, especially at the tail end, if you are running evergreen paid media, and we'll talk about, as Tasha mentioned, what that looks like a little bit more in a future session. And you're not really focused on the relationship of the email portion of that, you're going to find that a lot of those donors don't renew. Or if you're running a lead generation campaign, unsubscribe or don't engage or don't click or don't open. um, and especially for acquisition, either lead or donor, if you're not really cognizant of what you're sending and the pace at which you're sending communications to donors, you can kind of inappropriately or inadvertently train your pet dragon the wrong way, where they start to we find that the file starts to have an assumption about what they should and shouldn't be receiving from you. I think there's a fear about how much email you can send. And we for whatever reason in this sector have this fear of pushing too much email. But what I say to clients is subjectively from your own experience, how many emails, Best Buy or if you're in Canada, Hudson's Bay will say, like it's 1, 2, 3 a week. Those were the most Canadian examples I could have given.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of an American example. But it's incredibly high. And so, the learned behavior of most consumers is that email at a high frequency isn't that big a deal. And so setting that relationship and that standard up at the beginning of a relationship is often the best way to long-term ensure you're creating high levels of engagement later on in the relationship. I'm done talking now. That's enough.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And what about yourself, CJ? Like, as somebody who really specializes in email, how how important do you feel like email comes into that in like donor engagement strategy? Is it feels like a cornerstone to me in many ways.
Yeah, and inversely, what Trevor was talking about, email can actually play a big part in how you target and deliver your paid media.
Yeah.
Email, in terms of ROI, just in terms of the cost, is obviously much less than doing a paid media ad campaign. So use your email, especially an evergreen email. Even though Trevor said he's not going to bring it up again, I'll bring it up. The poop email, the poop example is an example. The engagement that perhaps got, maybe it wasn't running on a social side or a digital ad, is maybe something like that. If once you see an email gets the response it does and the engagement rate it does, as you're monitoring your analytics and your metrics and statistics all the time after an email campaign, is inversely, that really hit the target. So why don't we turn this into and use this subject or theme for some targeted digital paid ads and use that and hit the same audience or a similar audience as well and try to spread it out that way. Because obviously doing that, it's lack of a better term, that testing or sort of that beta testing through email will actually give you insight into what you can spend on targeted paid media ads. So it certainly helps in terms of the costing and just targeting particular audiences with what particular subjects and themes and things like that. So yeah, that's all I've got to say on that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it is a really good testing ground too, right?
Sure.
Particularly for some of your new donors that you're maybe hoping to like have become recurring or have do a second gift or whatever. Like, what are they interested in, right? As they come into that journey, especially. So, as from the email expert side of things, like CJ, how often would you say, Trevor brought it up that most nonprofits are not emailing enough? what would you say you've seen like as kind of success rates, or what is a good kind of email cadence to be having?
That's a bit of a tough one because every organization is a bit different. But to Trevor's point, yeah, I think every organization isn't probably emailing enough, regardless of your size and regardless of your contacts in your database, the numbers that you have, the types of demographics and supporters that you have. So it can vary drastically. But so I wouldn't want to say there's a certain number that you need to give send annually or even monthly. That's something each organization needs to take a look at. But I can safely say from the clients we've dealt with, definitely not sending enough. Just sending out maybe a monthly newsletter update, and then it's all asks and campaigns, and a lot of the time it's Giving Tuesday or holiday year end, right? So there's none of that evergreen or cultivation that's happening in between. So you really need to find that balance between stewardship, cultivation, fundraising asks, events, emails. You have maybe events that you do, signature event a year, that sort of thing. You've got your P2P side of things as well. So there's no sort of hard number, but every organization is going to have to make that decision. But to the point about some of the commercial businesses that Trevor was mentioning, for a nonprofit, we really have to, it's been a number of years we've had to sort of think that way, where we've really got to get out there and get our name out there. And I know obviously the discussion on evergreen content in the first session heavily focused on that, was to be actually out there all the time, because you've got some warm supporters and some warm subscribers, and you've got to keep them engaged and get to the point where they can become a single gift donor or turn into a monthly donor, what have you. So you need to always be out there and sending those emails. And to the point earlier about, they just need to be bite-sized emails, and there can be some asks in between as well. But there's also some really good engaging type pieces that you could do as part of a cultivation series in terms of getting people to respond. Like we talked about, is having people respond to a survey or fill in some more data information. A lot of the time we're going to get a subscriber, and to get that subscriber is really, we just want a minimal effort and minimal resistance. And so it's just asking for an email and maybe a first name, right? But to sort of fill out that contact and fill out your database, you're going to want more information. Maybe you're going to want to do SMS messaging as well. You're going to have to get a phone number, mobile phone number. You'll need to get permission for that as well. So setting up a form or some sort of like a supporter hub or something like that as part of your organization, as part of your CRM. That would be important to have too, so that you can start collecting more and more data on your individuals, but also let them decide on how often they want to be contacted as well. Put in, a schedule, like your sort of basic annual calendar. How many times do they want to be asked for a gift? Maybe they only want to be asked at holiday time. That's their giving time to all the causes that they give to. So we really need to empower those people who are coming in and coming to the organization, and give them an opportunity to say how often they want to hear from us as well, or from the organization. So I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The reality is, which I think we all know, like we're at the whim of kind of learned behavior from the commercial side, right? Like there's far more an individual will run into far more for-profit stuff on a day-to-day basis than they will nonprofit stuff. It's just the reality of the world in which we work, right? Coca-Cola is always going to have more money than us. And so the downside to that is obviously we have to fight for top of mind. The upside is that we get all of these incredible learnings that the commercial sector has had to spend millions of dollars to understand. And one of those is that allowing people to choose their own adventures, it relates to their interaction with your business, is far and above the best way to create high levels of engagement. One of the simple things that we don't do a lot of, what we really should do is offer options for an email unsubscribe. So when somebody goes to unsubscribe from your newsletter, are you asking them if they'd simply like to decrease the frequency of the emails they're getting? Probably not, right? Or are they just getting stuff that they don't want? Can they change Can they change their adventure with you as an organization and save that unsubscribe from the file? Well, truthfully, I'm not sure. I think that commercially, there's probably a reason that Amazon does it and that all of these other organizations, for-profit organizations, do it. But none of our clients have taken us up on wanting to offer that second level of unsubscribe. So there's a lot of different stuff that I think we can do to kind of aid in that uh, personalization of their experience with your organization, especially on the email side when we have so many options available to us as it relates to content and personalizations in the email and deployment timings and automations and triggers. There's just an endless world of possibilities in email that not a lot of these other channels allow us access to.
I'm going to just ask for anybody watching, you can throw it in the comments if you want, but what are you using out of curiosity for email? Because I always am so curious as to what nonprofit organizations are using or have used or have a favorite or things. I'm right now working in MailChimp with my own organization, and I just detest MailChimp so much. And I understand that other people love it and can make it sing, but it is not my jam at all. And I just don't like what is available. But there's so many fantastic tools out there on the market too. So, yes, it's a big job to switch over to something new. But I think if your mail provider doesn't do what you'd like it to do, there is absolutely more out there than there's ever been before to make some of those pieces you talked about background work too, right, Trevor?
For sure.
Okay, so I'm going to move into talking about the different, I think, venues or different streams almost, because I think they are different. And I mean, CJ's alluded to a lot of this already, but in terms of communicating with these different groups, some of them are already donors, some of them are potentially becoming donors. How do you adapt your messaging to make it more personable and relatable within these different groups?
Yeah, I mean, our first instinct is always data collection, right? Like the more you know about somebody, the more you're able to personalize the experience. And so things like asking what brought them to the organization, what they're interested in learning more about, what their connection is to the organization. For organizations that are, let's say, healthcare foundations, are they patient family, right?
Yeah.
Like these are all sort of data points that you can then use to customize the experience. Now, the caveat being you need to be prepared to act on the data you collect. Right. And that certainly, I think, is a challenge for a lot of organizations. It's like, okay, well, we've collected all this data, and now it looks like we need to create 15 email streams to accommodate all of these different interests. So, I think one of the things, I'm going to spoil this, and you're going to ask us later what organizations need to consider. Not that we plan these questions out, but I think one of the things you really need to consider is your content plan. Like, how are you actually going to create the amount of stuff you need to act on some of these personalizations, and then secondly, how can you bucket them to prioritize importance? And that's not to say one donor is more important than another, but over time, you may start to learn that people who are interested in one area of your organization over another tend to give more, tend to have a higher lifetime value. And, you're more than justified in placing more emphasis and priority on developing content for those specific groups. So data collection, I think, is sort of the first place that we go to via things like supporter hubs or record infills of some sort.
Yeah.
TJ, you got anything there?
Yeah, I mean, that is the number one thing is the data. You've got to have the data to be able to work with, to be able to segment and then come up with the content and the strategy to deliver that you need to. And I know that developing copy and content is obviously a big lift for an organization who maybe hasn't been doing any or very little evergreen type emails throughout the year. But I would suggest and recommend that best place for mining any information would be your website. Is go to your website when it comes to figuring out your content, your copy, and what might be more specific and applicable to certain segments, particular, whether that's a reoccurring giver versus a single gift donor versus just a subscriber. Use your website. It's I'm sure it's a repository of some great information, and even articles going back years can be reused and repurposed for email content, and coming up with your calendar, your plan about what type of email you're going to deliver and what it's going to say and ask for. So definitely use that as a resource that you can find old articles. Maybe there's a chance to update those articles. Maybe if it's a past donor who had a profile done on them. Are they still in your database? Maybe since it's been a number of years, do a follow-up with them. Do an update on that particular feature of a monthly donor that can be targeted to your reoccurring donors as well, or to your single gift donors, to talk about why somebody would give on a monthly basis or as a recurring giver. Yeah, so I think in addition to the data, I think the big part then after that is the content and the pieces of content and who's going to receive what. And I think a good place to start in terms of advice is your website.
So out of curiosity, like just, when, let's say you've got them on a one-time donor journey, like they're headed in, you've got this whole onboarding, maybe it's going up to 12 months, maybe it's 6, however long your group has figured it for. What if they take the step and become a recurring donor, which is like holy grail, everybody's aiming for that? How does that then change their journey, right? Like how do they move off track? Do they head in this direction? Because I think what often happens is there's here's the thank you email, thanks for now being a recurring donor. But either they stay maybe on the same track as they were before, which maybe that information is not going to be quite as relevant because now they're doing something else. So how would you guys handle that conversation? Or what would you advise clients to be doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what we find often, and I'm sure people watching this can relate, is there's a lot of recycled content between the one-time gift series and the monthly series, right? Like it often looks like a similar set of content. I think that works until, Tasha, as you said, you get somebody who's coming off of one-time gift into monthly. Now, the benefit of that transition is that they've spent presumably 3, 4, 5, 6 months, a year already getting to know the organization. So you don't need to go back through that education phase of like who we are, what we do. You've done what you meant to do. So do you look to create a much shorter series that before they get dropped into the annualized calendar of communications? That's certainly a possibility. I think always holding some content that's unique to your monthly donors is certainly valuable because it provides a value add. Things like we've talked about membership, quote unquote, before, but that's essentially what it is, right? Like, what are the value adds that they get for becoming part of this monthly giving circle? Is there anything that you can offer them that's unique to their now new experience with your organization? If we had our way, if CJ and I had our way, the amount of content we would ask for from clients would be an insurmountable amount of stuff. And so, one of the exercises, it actually brings up a good point. One of the exercises we recently went through with a client was simply laying out on a whiteboard, what are the things we have available to talk about? Like, what are the stories? How can we use these? Are some of them better suited to donation asks? Or some of them simply better suited to stewardship? Or some of them better suited to new donors versus people who've been on file for a lot? Like, getting a scope of your universe and using the website, as CJ said, is probably a really good activity if you're looking to kind of redevelop some of your email cultivation. Getting a sense of what you're able to talk about in partnership with your Marcom team is probably an exercise worth going through, because it'll give you a real sense of like, do we have enough to sort of do this, or do we need to put aside some budget to go out, to have our field teams go out and kind of create some new content so that we can provide these unique experiences? But laying it all out in a whiteboard and kind of starting to divide it amongst the buckets was at least for this client a really interesting activity.
We also really get caught up oftentimes. I'm just as bad for it in marketing as anybody else, but everything you forget that just because something came out 5 years ago,
100%.
it's not new, it's not net new to your new
Yeah.
subscribers.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
right? They don't know what you did 5 years ago. And I mean, yes, some things are more relevant, some things will become irrelevant, and we have to keep on top of that. But there's also a lot of great work that nonprofits have done for years that I think it's still great to share that, like what did you do back in 2020 during the beginning of the pandemic? We did X and it affected this many lives, and like sharing those stories, sharing old videos, like a video from 4 years ago is not probably going to like land that flat, most of promotional videos. So I think there's a lot of recycling that,
Yeah.
can.
And apologies if there's copywriters or Marcom folks in the room. I know certainly we're guilty of it, but yeah, Tasha, you're absolutely right. Like I think we are the ones reviewing the email 5 times, right? Like we're the ones sort of tracking the calendar and deployments and knowing what we talked about. And we used this story 3 springs ago. The reality is, I think probably a lot of people either didn't engage or won't remember. So reusing it is certainly an option. We're talking a lot recently, and I don't know if we've formed a complete opinion here, but we've been talking a lot about volume versus value, quality, right? Like a value versus volume. And there's certainly an argument to be made that volume, we're coming to a place in time where volume is the more important metric. We're just being at the top of an inbox, regardless of the quality of the email. Now, to a point, is almost more important than what's in the email itself. And it's a byproduct of how people are now consuming content in places like TikTok, where you're expecting the people you're following to post 3-4 times a day about the chicken wing they ate in their car. Like we're not talking about high production James Cameron content that's being produced, but it's just a matter of appearing enough that somebody comes to look for you later on. And there's certainly an element of email that is able to do that. And as I said, I think we're still trying to figure out like what is the balance and how far down that volume rabbit hole can you go before you start to sort of sacrifice things like your core mission and cause and mission statement. Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to add, CJ? Or I'm going to go to the next question here, and I'm going to post it to you first.
Chris,
Yeah,
just
sure.
put Throwback Thursday on it is exactly what we're talking about. Just put Throwback Thursday on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And actually, before we move on to that came to mind actually when you were talking, and yeah, glad to see that somebody posted that as well. Is the Throwback Thursday is a very popular thing, but also I think organizations, regardless of how long or how old you are, we tend to not really talk about the history or the origins of the organization. And I think that's a really good piece of content to mine and use when you're onboarding or welcoming new subscribers or new donors, to get a sense of the history of the organization, the origin of it. Maybe the mission's the same, but perhaps the demographics, the audience maybe have changed since the organization started, and maybe there's a new market that needs a new demographic that has the cause needed. So Throwback Thursday, history, origin stories of the organization. Those are all good pieces of content to do and utilize as well. Yeah.
Biopics of people internally,
I was going to say highlighting your staff.
Totally.
I think sometimes like, why are they there? Why did they work? Why did one thing I don't see very many nonprofits do, but I think is interesting when it's done. Why are their current monthly donator, like monthly donors donating, right? Like that's such an interesting case study. You as the person interviewing get so much information as to like the why of those people as well. Chris, I love Chris and I have connected over LinkedIn recently, but YMCA History Day, right? Like that's cool. Like that's a great reason, because most of us would not know that backstory, right? And shout out to Amina Muhammad is on here as well and has been sharing little pieces along the way. But she's doing a fantastic job, not only highlighting people going through her program, which is Camera for Girls, but like there are great people doing excellent excellent different pieces of like omni-channel work along the way. But I don't think you can double up, like you noted, Trevor, your social media and your paid ads and your email can all say the same story. People are
Yeah.
not going to get sick of a good story, right? Like maybe it's only a small piece of it on your Instagram, and then there's a clip on TikTok, and then you've got a longer email sharing about what's happening, right? So I think it's really neat to see that. And the only other piece I was going to add before we move on, long newsletters. I would rather get like one email a week with a portion of something. Like, here's our tech highlight for the week, or here's our letter from the founder this week, but like these emails that are like, I never get to the bottom. I love, and these are stories I love. I would love to just have like once a week. Here's a little, right? So I think a lot of orgs tend to do that monthly newsletter, and that's a lot for people to handle, especially if you're doing a lot of work, right?
Yeah. I think, we have a client who's decided recently to do away with it and instead essentially take the content that they're putting the work into creating and break it out into multiple emails in the month, because they'd much prefer people actually engage and read the content than just bypass the email. And the unfortunate reality is that a lot of organizations are only sending that email so a month to your existing file. And so if that's the case, then the chances of them seeing it and opening it are really quite low.
Yeah.
So if you can again provide more opportunity to see the sender name at the top of the inbox, the more often you're going to get engagement, and obviously your hard work pays off and somebody reads it.
Yeah, and too many CTAs. Like,
Yeah.
like which one should I click? Like so like I think people need that focused attention.
Yeah.
So we have to move on. If anybody has questions, throw them in, but we're gonna wrap this up for sure. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, guys. And so we're gonna kind of end off with this. What do organizations need to do to consider just kind of maturing this email program? And I'm going to post this first to CJ, just because I know you're often the one actually putting this all together in the background for our clients. So what would you say organizations should kind of start thinking about?
Yeah, we've touched on a number of them already. Key ones we've talked about is a strategic plan, is coming up with your calendar and the timing and the delivery that you want to do to the target audiences, the content strategy, the strategic planning. We talked about data management as well, having all those pieces all together. That's very important for having a mature email program. Taking to the next level, the automation and integration and personalization. That's obviously a very big piece of a mature email program, is starting to look at doing an automation. And yeah, there's some heavy lifting at the beginning, but once you've got that set up and launched, then it's you can almost forget about it for the year at least, and revisit it again and look at that. Yeah, obviously you're monitoring the numbers and statistics along the way, but in terms of a refresh, it could be something that becomes an annual type thing when it comes to you setting up your automated. We've talked about the cultivation and welcome series onboarding, things like that. Test, and optimize. That's obviously a very important thing. That's a big thing. Who's ever doing your email in your organization is they're taking. I can guarantee you they're spending a lot of time having to test that email, having to test that new wrapper, having to test the new branding that perhaps you're implementing for a campaign or for an annual thing. Making sure that it's rendering properly as best it can in all the different devices, your mobile, your tablet, your laptop, all the different email programs out there. So there's definitely plenty of tools that give you insight in terms of how your emails look. Things like Litmus or Email on Acid. There's all sorts of tools that will give you insight as to how your emails are looking on different platforms, different devices before you push that email out as well. So test. Yeah, I think that's all I got at the moment. Trevor, anything?
Nope, that was a great list. I got nothing.
You got nothing. Just if worst comes to worst, you can throw Poop IQ on the title of your nonprofit email. It might not be relevant, and people might open it anyway, right? So
what I've learned.
You know what? Hints from the Yibu team here. But yes, We're the Yibu Digital team. Thank you to anybody who attended today. Much appreciated. And in 2 weeks, we will be back again with Trevor and our other colleague, Emre, and talking about just that paid media side and how that pulls into Evergreen, right? Because we're, Evergreen, the whole idea is things that are running more continuously. It's not your Giving Tuesday. It's not your year end. It's, that more like overall year holistic approach. And so, we're going to cap it off with paid media. But thank you, CJ. Thank you, Trevor. This was super fun. And thank you, everyone who attended. Super thankful for you guys to be here, and reach out. We'd love to chat with anybody who has questions about email. So cheers. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.